Hey everyone, it's Lisa Graves here with Nadine Smith at the 5, 8 and a half. We are glad to be here yet again on another Wednesday night in the sea of chaos that is the new reality. Nadine, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I think I've mentioned maybe once, twice, 12 times that I have made mead. I have learned to make mead in the wild, and the patience is the key thing. And I finally uncorked my homemade mead and had a taste test, and it's pretty good. I mean, like it's really. I may have a whole side hustle now.
So can I just clarify mead? Is this the honey-derived alcoholic substance that bees are wildly attracted to if you happen to drink it outdoors, as I once did, much to my dismay?
I'm glad I could trigger a traumatic, teenage memory, but yes, my robot friend, it is the delicious alcoholic beverage derived from honey. Yeah, no, it really is, and we made it with all of the things that we found in this wilderness area.
Oh,
But yeah, I feel like an alchemist. I feel like
yeah,
a
seriously. I mean, on that in that case, in that case, since you've gathered the ingredients and made
yes,
a delicious
tree bark
elixir, I want
and
to honor that. I want to honor
yes,
that,
and
despite the
pine
swarm.
tips. Yeah,
And
so
what?
if anybody wants some of Nadine's mead tips, go ahead and drop a comment and hit subscribe while you're there. So while
Right.
I was making mead, you were out here making history, out here publishing your book.
Yes, the
Look
book
at that.
came. The book came to my
Look at
house,
that.
which was super, super exciting. I can't believe it. I mean, obviously, I've looked at this book electronically now for months and months and months and months, but I cannot. I just sort of couldn't believe that it's actually here. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Turn it
this is.
sideways so we can see how thick
Oh,
it
yes.
is. So we can understand just how many miles you've actually, dragged Robert's.
Well, so here's the thing. It was 150,000 words, but we cut it down to 102,000 words. So there were more words,
Sequel?
that had been said, could be said. So but I did have an extensive, massive amount of endnotes that I'm hoping to put up on the site so people can see the full set of um, resources that went into the book. But yeah, okay. I think the book is fantastic. I used to joke for years. I used to joke that if I got paid by the word, I'd be a millionaire. Those are the ambitions. It turns out I got paid by the word, and that is not the case at all, at all, at all. But I'm happy to have the. I didn't really get paid by the word. I got a small advance from people who believed in me in the publishing world. But so I'm not trying to begrudge that, but it is not the path to fortune. It is not the path. I really if I could have done romance novels, I suppose, or maybe detective stories or something
Well,
to get
definitely
Oscars
not
in
romance
Hollywood.
novels involving John Roberts. That would have
No,
been
no, no,
wrong.
no, no, no. That would not. No.
Well, but let
Ah,
me ask you this. I know, I'm sorry that I put that image in anybody's
that
head.
was like an ear. That was like the visual equivalent of an earworm.
That's
Oh
right.
no.
It was like drinking mead in a field full of bees.
Yes.
Uh, but
Ah.
how has it been? Because I know, first of all, heads up to everybody. Lisa Graves is going to be a guest on Wide Awake America coming up
Yes.
soon, to
Yes. Yes.
TBD. But you've been making the circuit. You've been traveling around. You've been talking to different audiences. How is the book being received?
Well, the critics, the reviewers have given it really positive reviews. And I have had some great reviews by people I really admire, like Senator Whitehouse, Sheldon Whitehouse, Jane Mayer, Nancy McLean, Gregor Oliar, and others. And so that's been exciting. I'm about to do a little bit of travel to support the book, and this month, and then planning on doing some more travel, like getting together a much longer set of a book tour than just this month. So yeah, I'm really excited by it. And I can't believe it's real, like I just said. I'm still sort of in the pinch me stage of it, but I'm so glad it's out there. And the zeitgeist. So from the time, I don't know if we talked about this before, but when the publisher first contacted me in late 2022 about, would I write a book or consider it, I was like, yes, but I don't know how, and I don't know what work like. What do you do? From that time, then in 2023, we had a lot of conversations about what I wanted to write about, and I really wanted to write about John Roberts because I feel like he's gotten away with this constructed image of himself as an umpire, this fair umpire, that is not true. He's chosen to reverse the law, regress the law, and I really thought people needed to know that. And so they finally got me the contract last spring, spring of 2024. Kind of after all that, went through all their channels to figure out, are they going to go with this book? So I wrote it on my summer vacation and every weekend last fall and winter, and with the determination that it could get out this year in time for the 20th anniversary of Roberts being sworn in, which is this week. So it was a lot of work doing my full-time job and then doing this in the weekends and evenings. I think I might have said, I had called one of my friends, the amazing Bob O'Hara, who passed away last year. I called him in September and I told him that I had no idea that writing a book was so physical. It seems like you're just sitting there, but I said, Bob, my ass hurts. I can't sat this long in a row. Now I do a stand-up desk, so I do stand up and walk around. And he said, yeah, you just gotta walk. You just gotta walk whenever you're not sitting. And so that's what I learned. Things I learned on my summer vacation.
Well, listen, that may be true, but I bet it didn't hurt as much as John Roberts' ass hurts. Now that the book is out there and in people's hands, I see Paulette Feeney already has a copy. Yeah, gosh, what if people did just start buying it and mailing it to John Roberts? Is that possible?
Well, that would be fine with me and the publisher, I'm sure. Just a book alone, no other stuff, obviously. Gotta respect the safety and security of all things. But I do, I think every chapter there are revelations that most people don't know, and in fact, in some instances, nobody knows. So I think that as Nancy McLean said, she basically called it a page turner, which is very exciting for a book about the court and about the law and public policy. But I do think that when you read it, you will be stunned by how much you didn't know about John Roberts, his background, his actions, his agenda, and the way this whole network has come together to pack the court.
Well, I wonder now. You told us what the critics said, and that you've gotten great reviews, and I've read some of them already. Have you heard from any of the John Roberts loyalists? Have you heard from any of the the folks who prop up that system?
I have not yet, although I'm sure they've had meetings about me and about the book. So we'll see what happens next in terms of the attack machine or what have you. But it's also the case that sometimes people will not respond because they don't want to make the book into a bigger deal, in essence, than it is. They have that Streisand effect of publicizing something they don't like. But we know that when that's the case, they get some of their other guys to do the dirty work for them and get someone else to, run the sort of opposition campaign to assail someone who dares to write the truth about them. We saw that with, interestingly enough, at one point during the work I was doing on the American Legislative Exchange Council, we were doing probably nearly 2,000 open records requests a year across the country for communications with ALEC and with state entities, from ALEC legislators and from, involving ALEC legislators. That's the group that describes itself as the largest voluntary association of state legislators in the country. In fact, is the largest group of state legislators who are underwritten by some of the biggest corporations in the world so that they can vote as equals on so-called model bills policy before they're introduced in the State House. Anyway, during that work, we encountered their opposition management strategy. And one of the documents, hilariously, had this whole little piece on how ALEC had hired this big PR firm to assail its critics, and one of their main opposition efforts was targeting me and Bill Moyers. How dare we? Because Bill Moyers had narrated a documentary about ALEC and my work, and so they were trying to, dig up things about Bill Moyers and me, and I just thought, well, that's pretty good company. Then, if you'll bear with me telling the story, we got another document that had been sent out by ALEC to all the state legislators in the country. So like all of their members that they claim to have 2,000 legislators and all of the corporate lobbyists. And in the message, they say, we've been assailed again by the Center for Media Democracy and Lisa Graves, a hippie who used to work for the ACLU. And I thought it was hilarious because I'm the biggest square I know, actually. And you could call me a lot of things, but a hippie is just like, I was like, wow, that their intel just has got me wrong. But of course, they didn't tell their members that I'm the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the U.S. Department of Justice in the Office of Legal Policy, back when that title meant something. Or that I was the Chief Counsel for Nominations for the Senate Judiciary Committee, or I was the Deputy Chief of the Article 3 Judges Division for the Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts, or that I was the Senior Legislative Strategist for the ACLU on National Security. Didn't tell them any of those titles. They were just like ACLU hippie, ACLU attorney. So we'll see what we'll see what attacks they bring. But I'm proud of the book. I stand by the book, and I think everyone should know what I know about John Roberts and about the group of super wealthy people who helped get him on the court and have helped move this extreme and regressive agenda forward. And all the way, oh, by the way, like, I'm not opposed to hippies. I'm just not one. I'm not a hippie. So.
That's okay. Some of my best friends are hippies. Greg Olear.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm what comes to mind is watching West Wing. And when a book would come out, they would all pretend publicly they weren't reading it while feverishly going through the index to see how many times their name appears and all of that. So I'm absolutely certain that they're burning the midnight oil right now at the Supreme Court. And
well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because your name and Greg's name and Stephanie's name appear in my acknowledgments of people who have been great supporters of my work. So you're in there now. You're in it.
I'm in it now. Me and Bill Moyers. I don't know who's they're going to investigate next. That's great company. If you're going to be the target of an investigation, Bill Moyers is pretty good company to keep.
One of the great good guys, a huge loss this summer when he passed away. One of the giants of journalism and investigative reporting.
Yeah.
And also just such a thoughtful and humane person, such a kind person who, did so much to shine a light on our history, on our planet, on environment. His interviews with Wendell Berry, his, examination and promotion of poetry in the world, the work that he did, in the LBJ administration on behalf of civil rights and civil society. Just one of the great good men who walked this earth.
Yeah. Well, the absence of of that kind of gravitas and integrity in mainstream media, what hasn't been bought has been brought to its knees. And so I'm thrilled for you. I'm thrilled that the book is out there, because it's hard to understand fully what is happening without understanding the role of John Roberts. And I'm thrilled that you continue not just to write this book, but with your Substack, you continue to be part of that independent media ecosystem that people can turn to. And why I launched Wide Awake America, because we need to be able to hear from people, not just in rage baiting, sound bites, but in long form ways that help people understand what is unfolding. And speaking of helping people understand what is unfolding, boom, government shutdown. Government shutdown. On the one hand, And under this administration, that sounds pretty good. Can we keep it shut down permanently? But as you look closer, we begin to see what this shutdown really means, and who's paying the price, and who's being furloughed. The
Yeah.
Head Start teachers and researchers and public health staff and food inspectors and local transit workers, the people who actually keep society running, are going to suffer while political elites continue to posture. And this is one of those moments where the president is Republican, the Senate is held by Republicans, the House is held by Republicans, but they have spent all of their political infrastructure, all of their media infrastructure, driving a story that attempts to place the blame at the feet of Democrats, who are simply fighting to try to stop our healthcare from being absolutely gutted. So,
Yeah,
but
it's
yeah,
Trump
where
shutdown.
are we now?
It's Trump shutdown. And we saw like his statements, which are consistent in their own Trumpian consistency with previous statements, like saying it wouldn't be useful to meet with the Democrats, wasn't going to meet with them, doesn't care to meet with them, then met with them, and then posted a meme with the House Democratic leader, in a sombrero, with the Democratic Senate leader with a funny voiceover. Like just it's like, I don't know how anyone can negotiate with someone whose mentality is so childish, unless they're bringing, gold, gold or gold appearing gifts to lay at his feet in the Oval Office.
Well, one of
It's not
them,
really a negotiation. It's just a currying favor and kissing the
yeah,
ring sort of thing,
there's no pretense. They don't hide it. It is just an open market of corruption and payola and grift. We're seeing the same thing in Florida, where DeSantis issued today the waste list from, Doge has gone into local government and gone through all the files, and so they announced, oh, we found it, waste all over the place. And it is absolutely a throw the spaghetti at the wall attempt to distract from the fact that DeSantis is, essentially given away $83 million to one of his, political buddies in a land deal where taxpayers in Florida are paying 10 times what the land is worth. But it's like, don't pay any attention to this corruption, this grift over here. Look, they paid. This city sponsored a Pride event for $75,000. Isn't that crazy? Well, that city could sponsor Pride for 1,100 years and still not equal what DeSantis has just handed to one of his political buddies. And so this is the world that we're living in.
Well, right. And, and similarly, this idea that we can't afford America, meaning the Trump administration, it doesn't want to pay, doesn't want people on Medicaid to get access to the services they need to stay alive and, have support so they can thrive. But of course, we can give, is it $18 billion
I think it's $83 billion to
$83
Argentina.
billion. Yeah, to prop up the country of the guy who presented Elon Musk with the chainsaw at CPAC,
right,
to destroy our agencies, if I'm not mistaken. So that's money out of our pockets that it's headed toward, someone who has sought to suck up to Trump.
Let me give a shout out. Let me just give a shout out to Judd Legume, because he takes on that story about this $83 billion bailout. And then breaks it all the way down to which particular billionaires, not only Trump's political, allies on the international scene, but the specific billionaires that are being bailed out with this money. And I think the other thing that is really horrific, and it is the role that JD Vance is playing in this propaganda, where he is saying, oh, look, the Democrats aren't fighting for your health care. They want to make sure that health care is going to illegal immigrants. In fact, we've shut down the funding for emergency room services, right? Which
Yeah.
essentially is the money that makes sure that whoever shows up, if you are in need of life-saving intervention, you get life-saving intervention. They don't ask if you've got insurance. They don't ask if you
Right.
are here on vacation or an undocumented worker. That is, because the alternative is to have people bleeding out in the,
Yeah.
the emergency bay. And JD Vance is saying, yeah, that's what we are shutting off the funding to ensure that um, only Americans, verified through whatever process, if they show up bleeding on the in need of intensive care at an emergency room, instead of doctors immediately springing into action, they should be left to die. It is as dystopian and evil as it gets.
Yeah, it is
So
monstrously immoral. And like, what are you supposed to just walk around with your passport all the time in case a tree falls on your head and you get to the emergency
yeah,
room, you don't have your passport, good luck. I mean, it's an absurd scenario. But we also saw the Republicans, people who have deep ties to Leonard Leo, objecting to Biden's effort to apply EMTALA, the Emergency Medical Act that was adopted during the Reagan administration to prevent hospitals from dumping patients, from not treating them because they were poor. When Biden sought to make sure that those protections for access to emergency care were applied to women who would come into an emergency room in Idaho, for example, and seek medical care. And Idaho was, after the Dobbs decision, after Roe v. Wade was reversed by the Roberts Court, Idaho basically issued its statute said that the doctors could not treat unless the person was on the brink of death. And the doctors would be prosecuted if they did perform an abortion. And, there was the right-wing GOP crowd eager to stop women from getting access to an abortion if it would, if they were not quite on the brink of death. And then we saw the after effects of that similar law in Georgia, where, I think one or at least two women that I read about, probably more, bled out because they were denied access to an abortion, to services to prevent them from dying from the pregnancy that was risking their lives. While doctors try to figure out, could they operate? Maybe they could, maybe they can't. So the cruelty of this right-wing MAGA crowd is extraordinary, and yet they want to claim, and some of them in their news conferences proclaim with their jewelry, with these very large crosses, that they're Christian. And, having been raised as a Christian, I can scarcely imagine something more unchristian than in the form of, Christ-like behavior as the Bible depicts it, denying someone care at a hospital because they're an immigrant or because they're a woman who is, whose life is in danger, whose reproductive future is in danger because they've had a miscarriage and they need to have an abortion.
It's it is chilling. And I one of the things I think is important is that in moments like this, especially because it can feel so debilitating. It can feel so like, what do you do? How do you even push back against what is unfolding when their lies are so brazen? There's another story about Jared Kushner in this multi-billion-dollar deal to buy EA Sports. And the same people who were losing their minds over Joe Biden's son selling a painting and saying the price of that painting was inflated as a payoff to him, have no problem with the son-in-law of the president profiting untold billions of dollars in these relationships with Saudi Arabia and other countries. And so, yeah, it can feel really like, where do we even begin when all of these things are happening? But
Well,
I think it's important to put it into a perspective that tells us, a lot of this is show that is intended to cow us into this fearful position. The gathering of generals and top military brass that we've just seen is part of the theater of fear that they are seeking to create, where, when they say we want to flood the zone, they want to take the fight out of us, they want to leave us in this state of distress. um, like, don't fall for that. let's pay keep let's keep our eyes on what is actually happening, and what's actually happening is a whole lot of communities are coming together to push back. And in these moments when we have shutdowns, the message I would send is, let's look out for each other even more. Let's look out for that family who is about to be furloughed, and, maybe it's gonna be a little tough to put groceries, in the pantry while the shutdown is happening. Look out for your neighbors in this way. And I will risk sounding corny, but it is how we have gotten through, tough times before, and it's how we're gonna have to organize. So I'm always uplifted by the people on the ground wherever they deploy, um, who, who surround the ICE vehicles and call them out and try to shout to their humanity if there's any shred of it left. But I think when the dust begins to settle, we are going to find a whole lot more people who never thought of themselves as political,
yeah.
who were watching these horrific things unfold in their communities. So yes, I think anybody in the service who watched this man baby named Hegseth, who who allegedly is sober, but sure didn't sound it, as he peacocked his way across the stage, berating and attempting to intimidate, um, soldiers whose boots he's not qualified to shine. The question, so when Trump walks into this theater of the absurd and he says, "I've never walked into a room more silent than this," um, it reminds me of the parade. It reminds
Yeah.
me of the squeaky, wheel parade.
Yeah.
Compliance, but just barely. Contempt, barely concealed. And I am seeing more and more folks who are service members who maybe were like, politics, politics, but they watched that and they were disgusted by it.
Yeah, I mean, it was really shocking, even by the standards that we've been seeing now. And I had to go get my dogs. They were scratching at the door, so that was why I
I
stepped
just
away for a
assumed that
second.
John Roberts had sent a
No,
detail.
no, 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 no. But as a result, I did miss my chance to tell you of my favorite typo of the day, which was that just, and then we'll get back to Hegseth. But I accidentally called it the Trump shit down, and it just seemed like actually that really is what it is.
I like
And
it.
maybe we should try to rebrand
Hey,
it.
everybody, can we make that trend? Can we make hashtag Trump shit down trend?
Yeah, I mean, because I mean, anyway, but let's, obviously, it's a disaster unfolding as we speak, and then it is in the aftermath of the meeting that Hegseth called, and I, I I know that in some ways I may sound easily shocked, in part because I just keep, I try to keep this hopeful attitude about, it's possible. And I still believe, like you said, these things are going to cause more people to come together to, stand up together to defend to defend America, our nation, our communities, our families. But that performance by Hegseth before the generals was extraordinary. And someone actually posted a meme that was hilarious only for the time we live in. It's an editorial cartoon. It has Hegseth saying, "No more beardos, no more fatsos. And then Trump is behind him saying, "What about pedos?"
Oh,
Yeah, that struck me as but also like like this Fox, entertainment dude telling these generals who have lived their careers, most of them have probably came in as young men, maybe even before they were 18 years old, got involved to serve this nation, to protect our country, have served with distinction in order to get those roles, those leadership roles, and then to be lectured by this guy who can't even pull a proper pull up. Now, to be fair, I couldn't pull that pull up, but I'm not pretending to be, some sort of He-Man who gets to tell a bunch of generals that they're not fit enough to be in the chain of command, while the next guy that walks on the stage as the commander in chief certainly, wouldn't pass any of those standards, despite the absurd health claims of the doctor dude who then became a congressman dude who said that Trump was the most fit guy ever, despite what our eyes show us, on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, if you, I don't know, 15 years ago wrote this as a script, it would, the pages would be thrown in your face and you'd be frog walked off the studio lot because of the cascading absurdities, right? But
Yeah, it's just implausible. And then Trump, to use that platform, right? I mean, you couldn't script it because in part it's unscripted, although he did read part of his script. But the things that the notion, I maybe we're speeding into both the third topic and the second topic, but like the notion that the US military should be testing things out on the American people, should be using force against the American people in our cities, is beyond reckless. It is so dangerous and so contrary to the way the military has operated and is supposed to operate in our system of the rule of law. And also, it just shows the utter ignorance of Donald Trump, that in fact, every time the military is engaged in a particular conflict, there are rules of engagement. There are rules of engagement that are designed to honor our legal obligations internationally and domestically. And for Trump to basically say, or Hegseth now, I can't remember, if you spit, we hit. And in essence, the suggestion is they'll pardon anyone who beats someone up. I mean, it is also immoral, and it is an attempt to put our troops into positions that they have no real training to be in and no actual legal right to be in terms of walking our streets and being told by the president and his secretary of defense, I don't care how many times they want to print the word war, that their job is to harm people in America, and that's training for them. It is absolutely revolting and disgusting.
And yet all of those Second Amendment, this is my safeguard against tyranny, this is my safeguard against the military being aimed at citizens, are absolutely, showing none of that. It's like the moment you've been waiting for, fellas, has arrived, and where are you? I guess at home.
Well, yeah, and then the other part, and I think
polishing your guns.
I've said this before, like I really think that when this sort of thing happens, when you see them verbalize the cruelty that they want to impose, the just disregard for the rule of law, for the standards of military conduct, for being an honorable soldier in America, it just makes me think that the hashtag, what would a sexual abuser do? WWASAD, Trump, who was found by a jury of Americans to have sexually abused, to be a sexual abuser and to have lied about the things that he did, defamed the person that he sexually abused. Like, this is hashtag, what would a sexual abuser do? And Hegseth is there for the party, I guess.
Well, I want to point out one thing before we move to the danger of this enemy within language tied to deploying deployments to Portland and Louisiana and wherever else, they're trying to spark that triggering backlash that will let them unleash, their firepower the way they want to. And that is just to pay attention to, he said the standard will now become, there will only be one standard, it'll be the male standard. But he also said no beards. If you want a beard, join special forces. That is aimed at black male service
Yep.
members.
Yep.
And it's important that people who don't really understand, but it's very difficult for black men to maintain a close shave without getting these very painful razor bumps. And so the thing that allows them to have closely shaved beards instead of clean shaven faces is medical. It's not simply cosmetic. And the signal there is we are going to drive out women. We are going to drive out black men. We are going to send a message that wearing the military uniform is not a source of honor. It is not officer and a gentleman. It is a license to do as you please. In the same way that ICE hires bounty hunters and, Proud Boys and, white supremacist goon squads.
Yeah.
They want people who will be lawless, who will be unfettered, who will be as violent as possible. And they are testing the boundaries of what they can get away with. And the biggest and most important backstop against that in our country has been people showing up for each other, people escorting their neighbors to their court dates, and people on the street, yelling out when they see ICE. My feed is full of people talking about icy roads in different parts of the city or different parts of the state. But it's going to take that and a dedication to not being provoked. It's why these Charlie Kirk wannabes are showing up on HBCU campuses. They are trying to provoke the thing that will give them license for the stochastic violence they're itching for, or license for Trump to unleash what he wants to unleash. So it is a tricky moment that we find ourselves in, but it's important that instead of, hiding under the desk, we actually link arms in the street.
Yep. Yeah, and that does bring us to Portland, because I think one of the really beautiful things that happened in response to yet another pretext asserted by Trump to send troops into Portland, claim that it was, his claims about the safety or lack of safety there, et cetera, was, the governor and the senators and others circulating beautiful photos of, this is Portland right now, please share it, he's lying to you. And also the people who showed up to, to sing and dance and, have, celebrate Portland, celebrate Oregon, celebrate being with each other, rather than, to show the reality versus the concocted lie that Trump is trying to get Fox to cover, and these other outlets to cover, to claim that, this is warranted, despite the fact that the local authorities and the people do not want the troops to be sent into their cities. And also the reality of the math, that these are not like, first of all, there's like this claim that the crime is going up here and there. It's just a lot. Every time he tells that story, it's a lie. And even if it were true, it's not justified under our law, under Posse Comitatus and other longstanding statutes and other rules. The president can't just go and direct troops into the cities. And it just, I'm having this sort of moment. One of my colleagues, when I first started thinking about writing a book, I was at this retreat center, and she was writing this novel that I don't think was ever published, but the premise of the novel was, in essence, what if the Confederacy had won? Like, what would have happened to America had Lincoln's troops not prevailed, had the Union not prevailed? And my recollection was, the essence of it was that the federal troops would then be directed into all the states as slave catchers, into all, like, and it feels like it's like the Confederacy winning again, even though they lost, but winning this time, because now the troops are being sent in to conduct Kavanaugh stops, which is
Right.
the accurate description of what Kavanaugh and the Roberts Court have allowed to stop people because they look Hispanic, because their name is Latino, because they work in a field, because they work, and in a, in lawn services, or like just the racial profiling that this administration has pursued with the blessing of the Roberts Court. I just think it is just yet another among many outrages.
Yeah. See, I actually now think you should have a book on each Supreme Court justice, and so that people can collect the set.
Ooh, I really like that
Do
idea.
Kavanaugh next. Yeah, no, this is, I will say I am impressed with the grit and humor of the people of Portland, including the people who have been posting like faux Civil War letters. My dearest Sarah, I write to you from the farmer's market, like just having a lot of, mockery is a political act. And people who are doing, sort of old-timey war correspondence, how are you holding up in the midst of war-torn Portland, sir? The guy's like, I don't know. I'm going to
Humor
go
is so
have a
powerful. It's so
stone.
powerful.
My wife and I just came from brunch. We're kind of holding up okay, right? And I really do think that embracing mockery, not to minimize the danger, but to pierce this pageantry of fear, this flexing that they are doing, is, when we push back, they actually, they backed away from Chicago. Now they've come back, but it is an important part of the process that we continue to, just send the message that we are leaning in and unbowed.
Yeah.
And Portland has been doing that.
Yep.
Well, there's no
All right.
easy segue to the next one, so I'm just going to say more mass shootings. One of the things that we have been seeing is a real effort to conceal the reality in America that if you are the victim of a mass shooting, you should bet money that the shooter is almost exclusively white, or almost exclusively male, the majority, the clear majority white, very often young, very often raised in gun culture. The majority, the clear majority, are right wing.
Yep.
And so they will say anything to avoid dealing with that reality, dealing with that, that bottom line. So you have the guy who attacks the Mormon church, drives his truck through the door, jumps out, sprays the crowd with bullets, and then sets the building on fire. 4 dead. They expect to find 7 hospitalized, 1 in grievous condition, and the possibility in all of that destruction that more will be found. The MAGA supporters removed from his a picture of him with his wife. He was wearing a Trump shirt with an "Own the Liberals" slogan.
Yep.
Right? There's all of, he was an anti-choice guy. He was a right-wing organizer. There's no denying it. But their immediate instinct, even in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk being killed, was to try to take this white guy, from a conservative religious family, raised in gun culture, and, cloud the waters with a whole lot of different theories about who he was and, what internet, dark envelope within the internet he was a part of. And yet, again, someone who fits the exact profile of who we expect and have seen time and time again committing these mass shootings. So it is, yes, these, the guys have Trump posters, Trump flags, Trump T-shirts, and they don't want to, if it turns out, the moment it turns out to be, if it's a non-white person, the immediate ties to terrorism, we've got to look into what's going on with these people, what's radicalizing them. Perhaps we need to shut the
Yep.
borders until we find out what's going on with these people. Oh, it's a
Yep.
white guy? That's a lone wolf. That's a
Yep. Yep.
one-off. That's,
Yep.
who's to say what's behind this? That's just one person, acting on his
Yep.
own, and we should not look very deeply, at the circumstances that keep reliably creating the same circumstance over and over again.
Right,
So,
like Vance Butler in Minnesota, who assassinated the top Democratic leader
mhm,
in the state legislature and had a whole list of people that he was going after. That it's the same rhetoric unspools, but then when what happened in Utah happened, then suddenly it's supposed to be some sort of vast left-wing conspiracy traceable to progressive funders as a predicate, a pretext to try to go after foundations using RICO, the corrupt, the racketeering federal statute, to issue executive orders or directives, claiming that that America is being, crushed by some left-wing violence, all the while removing the long-standing data collected by the Justice Department,
right,
infused with detailed information, part of the detailed reporting that the FBI had been doing for many years to try to counter right-wing violence, and whether it was KKK infiltration or other like white supremacist groups, to really expose how the dangerous threat some of these groups have posed to Americans and to America with their stockpiling of weapons and their violent agenda. And yet you have this administration lying to the American people about that reality as a pretext for going after progressive organizations, progressive funders, and more, and trying to tie what one guy in Utah to progressive groups in a way that the local Utah authorities are trying to say, no, there's no evidence of that. Even the Republicans in Utah, not the Republicans in the U.S. Senate from Utah, like Mike Lee, but actual Republicans on the ground dealing with law enforcement and working on the prosecution of
mhm,
the murderer, the man accused of murder. They're saying like, no, there is no such evidence. But Trump wants to hit that drum along with Vance and his inside circle and try to use that as pretext and to deny the reality of violence in America and how much of it has been conducted by right-wing groups, violent white supremacist groups, violent anti-government groups, groups that sought to come together to kidnap the governor of Michigan,
right,
groups that were people who were working together to try to assassinate the first woman Speaker of the House in the Commonwealth of Virginia, because she was Jewish.
right,
The firebombing of the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania earlier this
right,
year, the attack on the legislators in Minnesota, including in particular some of the Jewish legislators in Minnesota, and the history of the violence of the anti-abortion movement, those ties as well. And so, and then this is also happening in the aftermath of Trump pardoning people who were convicted of violently assaulting police, violently assaulting our Capitol, and many of whom had other serious criminal records, including of spousal abuse and other bad action, and yet they have been set free by Trump.
yep.
So yeah, it's
Not
bad,
only
bad,
not only
bad.
set free, but they're also dismantling the, domestic terrorism unit
Yep.
and shuttering all of the research that named white supremacists as the number one domestic terror threat by a wide margin in the United States. So, they're not simply content to ban books and erase art and, all of these other things. They are seeking to rewrite history right in front of us. So it is a chilling time, but there are glimmers of fight back happening inside the courts, and I think it's worth highlighting that this week delivered a rebuke of the Trump administration's abuse of power. U.S. District Judge William Young, who is a Reagan appointee, and he's been on the bench for 4 decades. He ruled that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Homeland Security puppy killer, I'm blanking on her name,
Yep.
Kristi Noem,
No, Kristi Noem. Yep.
right? And their departments had deliberately and with purpose and a forethought targeted non-citizen protesters, chilling their First Amendment rights. And he was really, really clear in his, in the language that he was using. The only constitutional rights upon which we can depend are those we extend to the weakest and the most reviled among us.
Yeah.
And to the president's palpable misunderstanding that the government simply cannot seek retribution for speech he disdains poses a great threat to America's freedom of speech. It is heartening to hear words like these coming out of courts when we are dealing with the the reality that
Yep.
you outline in your book of how captured courts are, but there are glimmers of fight back that we should not ignore, even as we despair what's going on with the Supreme Court.
Well, that's right. And in fact, the lower courts have, for the most part, really actually been standing up for the rules, for law, for the Constitution. It's the U.S. Supreme Court under John Roberts, with the 6 judges in the Republican appointed faction, that have been going out of their way to overturn those rulings. But I wanted to quote from Judge Young's discussion of the issue of masks, because I just think it's so powerfully written, and I hope you'll indulge me. But he said, and then there's the issue of masks. This court has listened carefully to the reasons given by Öztürk's captors for masking up, and he's heard the same reasons advanced by the defendant, The court rejects this testimony as disingenuous, squalid, and dishonorable. ICE goes masked for a single reason: to terrorize Americans into quiescence. Small wonder, and then I'll skip ahead. But he says, in all of our history, we have never tolerated an armed, masked secret police. Before that, he said, masks are associated with the cowardly desperados and the despised Ku Klux Klan. And I'll let him conclude. He says, carrying on in this fashion, ICE brings indelible obloquy to this administration and everyone who works in it. Quote, we cannot escape history, Lincoln rightly said. It will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. That was part of Lincoln's second address. The whole thing is worth reading. We'll post the link in the chat. But it's a 140 some page opinion. It is so powerful. It really is must read, and it's just another sign that some members of the legal profession, some members of the judiciary, are actually willing to speak up and stand up for rules and common sense, and not be cowed by this administration and its intimidation efforts.
Yeah. And it's important because these words matter. I mean, I know there's some people who just go, it doesn't matter when we win at the lower level, when we know it's heading towards a fully captured Supreme Court, but it does matter because these words actually do hit. They resonate with us, and they stand in stark contrast to the pablum being, spewed by the Supreme Court in its twisted pretzel-like logic, trying to justify what is unjustifiable. And so every time you have a lower court judge say these things so plainly, so clearly, and speak, with a voice so potent on these values, it does matter.
Yeah, and on that point,
And
Nadine,
yet,
wait,
yeah.
I was going to add
No,
one
go
thing,
ahead.
which is, we, even though we don't have inherently great coverage of what has happened in other countries as they faced authoritarianism and authoritarian threats, you have to seek it out, seek out what's happening in the rest of the world, because you're not getting it certainly in the evening news, on the, mainstream stations, corporate stations. But there have been amazing movements in Poland, I think in Libya and other places, where it's judges who have spoken out in ways that have really awakened people to the risks that the country's facing. And in fact, in Poland, where judges were being pressured, they had marches with judges in their robes saying, they were not going to allow the state to basically overcome the rule of law in that country. And the courage of those judges to stand up helped turn the tide in that country in terms of what was happening, the repression that was happening. So we have a lot of things we can learn from other places about that power, the power of speaking up and standing up. And I definitely take my hat off to Judge Young. But I'm sorry to have interrupted you, dear Nadine.
Oh, that's okay. You can always interrupt me. I don't know what I was going to say, but it was going to be brilliant. Now it's lost forever.
Oh,
It's lost
I know it would
forever,
have been
Lisa.
brilliant.
No, I think what I was going to say is that, first of all, just to add to what you're saying, we are seeing uprisings around the world right now against authoritarians. We are seeing, students taking to the street and, people challenging the government. And at the end of the day, we are people who have friends and siblings and parents in the military. They're not, we're in some new territory right now. It's not completely unprecedented. It's unprecedented perhaps in our lifetimes, but I really hope, that Judge Young and these other voices, as important as they are, that people realize that people realize that I'm on live.
People realize that ordinary people
that from happening. It's never happened before. Yeah. But if there is a through line here, it's that the law alone cannot hold the line. That courts can issue rulings, but only public pressure, collective resistance, and civil defiance can prevent these authoritarians, who are trying to calcify their desires into precedent. And so, the glass half full, as we end each show, having laid out all of the things that are challenging, all of the things that are wrong, we want to make sure we leave you with some of the things that are right. And one of those things is that, once again, all across the country, in other countries as well, on October 18th, people will take to the streets for the second No Kings demo. This is a mass mobilization for free speech, for immigrant rights, for democracy itself, because in the face of lawless power, our answer must be to be louder, more visible, and more fearless. And so we end our show by lifting our glasses. We don't have a sponsorship deal, so I'm not going to show you what brand this is.
The power of nonviolent protest. Yes.
By lifting our glasses. No kings, no tyrants, no silence. Go out and get that book. Go out and get that book. Make Without Precedent part of your holiday shopping. Please do take a moment, if you haven't already, to subscribe. Yes. And if you enjoy hanging out with us, please share the link to friends and family, and especially to enemies who might benefit from hearing what we have to say. But on behalf of me, Nadine Smith, and Lisa Graves, thank you for joining us for your midweek refresher. We hope you will tune in on Friday for the 5-8. And until next Wednesday, look out for each other. Take care.
Yep. Thank you.